Welcome to the Psychedelic Passage podcast. My name is Jimmy Nguyen, your host. It's really great to be here with you all this week. I know I say that every week, but I really do mean it. I have a lot of fun recording this podcast and getting to share all of my wild thoughts and opinions with this audience. And it really does feel like every time I record an episode that I'm like almost like reaching through the microphone and the screen and getting to like have that conversation with each and every one of you. And so thank you so much for joining us for another week. And we sprinkle guests in and out of our podcast every now and then. And we have a guest here for you today, somebody that I've gotten to know over the past year plus. And we have Daniel Shankin from TAM Integration. And to share a little bit more about Daniel, Daniel is a psychedelic integration coach. And as a coach, Daniel serves people with emerging spiritual visions as they weave their newfound truths into their lives in a way that is sustainable, harmonious, and compassionate and wise. His methods are fiercely practical while maintaining space for mystery and magic to emerge. Folks have definitely heard me talk about the unknown and the mystery of psychedelic work before. He offers time-tested and scientifically backed tools so clients can create a life for themselves that are aligned with their deeper values and manifest measurable results that matter. And as the founder and director of TAM Integration, he's committed to offering radically accessible and inclusive support and education for people who are wanting to transform, heal, and grow. TAM's integration circles and online conferences enjoy a worldwide audience. He also leads the year-long Mount TAM Psychedelic Integration Coaching Program, training emerging leaders in the facilitation of transformational engagement. And he and his wife live in New England, where they forage for mushrooms and throw rocks into creeks with their two young boys. So, Daniel, a very warm welcome to
so much.
the Psychedelic Passage podcast.
Great to be here. And yeah, it's been great to, I first put a face to the name. Everybody knows what Psychedelic Passages is, but it was really cool to be on stage with you at that after party at Psychedelic Science. That was really fun. I got to feel your vibe.
Yeah, we were on a panel together, I believe, at I think our friends at Altered States had done a panel, and it was about being a psychedelic professional. And what I found there was that there weren't that many quote unquote psychedelic professionals in the room. And I think that's like the nature of the space right now is everybody's trying to find their place and find their lane. And one of my takeaways there was that the term psychedelic professional is probably like quite a amorphous term.
Yeah.
But you were the MC. You were the host of that panel, I believe.
Well, yeah, I moderated that, which was really fun.
I didn't share this with you before, but my sister's name is Tam. And I was always curious how the name TAM Integration came about. And I assumed that maybe it had something to do with like Mount Tam, which is why I had thought that you were on the West Coast, but clearly not. So do you have like an origin story around TAM Integration?
Well, I was living in Marin, right? And the sacred mountain in the middle of Marin is Mount Tam. And I would see, I would kayak in the mornings. And so the angle of the logo is Mount Tam from my kayak.
Wow.
Right? Because it looks different. Mountains aren't symmetrical. So they look different regarding where you are. And so that was my view of it. And I had nice experiences on and around it and things like that. And I always kind of thought the metaphor of climbing the mountain and then coming back down to the village is a powerful metaphor for psychedelic transformation in general, the hero's journey, perhaps. And so I thought that it was a good name, and I wasn't expecting to move. I thought I was going to grow old in Marin, and just, through pandemic and fate and babies being born and wanting to be near family, I relocated, but that's not Mount Tam's fault. So I just figured we'd keep the name, for the time being.
Yeah, no, in a way, you're kind of carrying the sigil of Mount Tam with you, it being on your logo and all of that too. And yeah, I really do like that imagery of climbing the mountain and returning back to community. That's quite analogous to psychedelic experiences. I definitely gravitated and attract to mountains myself. I had this funny experience driving through, speaking about, like sacred places, driving through Mount Shasta for my first
Love it.
time.
Yeah.
And it was like I like was in an altered state in itself, just like driving through that place. So I'll have to tell my sister that there's a whole integration coaching outfit that's
Yeah.
named after
Now, is
her.
her name, is it short for something? Does it mean something?
So Tam is her full name. Tam is a Vietnamese name, and then I think Mount Tam is short for
Tamalpais.
Tamalpais. Okay. Well, yeah, really great to have you here, Daniel. I find you really just intriguing on Instagram and social media. I can very much tell that your work comes in from a variety of different angles, but I find you to be like extremely insightful. And I imagine that didn't, come up like overnight. And so I'm just curious about how all of this, started, with you. From the little bit that I've gleaned, I know that you found some of these origins in yogic practice. I think found some of these origins in meditation and mindfulness practices. I think we've chatted a little bit about your mentors and whatnot, but just for the audience here to get to know you a little bit better, I'm curious what you have to share about how all of this psychedelic work came to be for you.
Psychedelics and spirituality have always gone hand in hand for me. And, the spirituality of the East, and also kind of like, this very American kind of hippie style kind of exploration of psychedelics and spirituality is kind of my roots. For example, the first time I heard the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra was on my mom's Hair record, right? For those of you who don't know Hair, it was a rock opera from the 60s. It was about the Vietnam War and expanding your mind and finding psychedelics and finding spirituality. And so,
Mm,
I stumbled upon my mom's record collection, and I really liked the kind of the ethos. I liked the art and the creativity, the art of the album covers, the messages and the lyrics. I was drawn towards that kind of the mysticism that was presented there and the creativity that was presented there that I wasn't finding in the suburbs, otherwise, right? So there's something richer and deeper in there. And as I followed that, it's like kids smoke pot and kids, I mean, high schoolers, high schoolers smoke pot, and, sometimes high schoolers take psychedelics, and that was my intro. I started going to concerts. Those were fun. I started going to Grateful Dead shows. And yeah, I was also introduced to yoga. My grandmother was doing yoga. And so kind of she introduced me to it. And, as soon as I was sort of out of the house, I was finding places to practice. That was kind of teaching me about, between that and my use, which was maybe recreational, but maybe something more. This is one of the things that I think people miss, is that they have these very clear, distinct buckets of what is recreational, what is ceremonial, what is therapeutic. And I think in the real world, those circles kind of start to create Venn diagrams that are personal for each person.
mhm.
And that was certainly true for me because, I was in college and I was smoking pot and I was going to yoga and I was reading yoga books and Buddhism books, and it all going to concerts. And that was all part of the same lifestyle for me. And,
Yeah.
it was yoga that would really started to give me spaciousness in my mind, right? Because often when we're growing up, and even more so, these poor kids with screens in their faces all the time, right? We didn't have screens in our faces all the time, but we were certainly busy. And I was certainly, I remember watching X-Files. I'd watch X-Files on Sunday night, and then I would go to yoga on Monday morning. And I realized, the teacher would be giving us instructions on how to direct our mind and to be mindful and watching our breath. And I couldn't help but notice that I was replaying the X-Files in my head. Like I was like it was stuck. And this is when I realized, and this is something that, we know about set and setting and digital dietas. This is something that, everybody who has mindful practices will tell you that what you put in, right, makes an impression on the mind, and then the mind has to process it. And so I was discovering, it's like, oh, wow, I'm having to process these very intense images. And I was like, so I should either stop doing yoga or I should stop watching the X-Files. And so I stopped watching
Mm.
the X-Files. The same thing happened with me
Wow.
with Taco Bell, because we were up late one night because we were kids, We went out for Taco Bell, and then I went to yoga the next morning, and I was still having to deal with the Taco Bell in my, we're trying to do twists.
A more visceral example of what our that our inputs
Yeah, of
matter.
digestion.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And it has been, like, it's been long. I haven't had Taco Bell longer than I haven't had a drink, because LSD
Mhm.
also told me you don't drink anymore. Right. So there's all this kind of psychedelic and mindfulness practices that sort of that purify us, that teach us, oh, that's not for you. That's not going to make you the
Mm.
person you want to be. So, like one day, like at Phil and Friends, Phil was a bass player for the Grateful Dead. And after Jerry died,
Yeah, Phil
Phil
Lesh,
Lesh,
right?
had these
Mhm.
concerts, this tour, summer of 2000. I think I was on tour. I was at the Gorge in Washington State. And I was on an unmeasured amount of LSD, like you do. And I ended up sitting down with some guys that I met and doing shots of whiskey in the middle of the day. And then I walked away, and the voice in my head was like, you don't do that anymore. I was like, that's
Mm,
never going to make you the person you want to be. And so it has
mm.
been, what year is it? 24. It's been 24 years since I've had a drink. It's been longer since I've had Taco Bell. It's been like 20, it's been like 26 or 27.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, when you get a message like that, and for context for folks, I think this episode will be a little bit more of a free flowing conversation. We'll definitely chat a little bit about integration work. I think a couple things that may take somebody from possibly being a novice to being more adept in psychedelic facilitation work. But Daniel and I just love to have great conversations, and I think within that there would be some cool nuggets there for folks. And I'm curious, Daniel. There were a couple things that you shared that I wanted to tease out, and one of them being, what was your process with that when you were on LSD, had some shots of whiskey, walked away, and you were getting this message like you don't drink anymore. Is that more about the substance, or is that more about you? Because many people, let me frame this up, I guess, is that many people say, "Oh, well, this drug is good for you and this drug is not," or this drug is productive and this drug is only recreational, to your point about putting things in buckets. And so I'm just curious your view about alcohol now that you know that's not for you,
Well,
and how does that shape your relationship with just substances and psychedelics in general?
well, I mean, there are studies that show there's numerous studies that show that alcohol is generally not good for people in most
Mm,
settings, right? A glass of wine at dinner, whatever it is. And, certainly many traditions use wine as a sacrament, and there's something magical about fermentation and all these kinds of things. But, alcohol is objectively more dangerous than mushrooms,
mhm,
right? So, I mean, I don't have a
mhm,
lot of judgment necessarily, as a coach, right? And so this comes to coaching. I try to stay agenda free and judgment free when I'm with my clients. And I
mhm.
sometimes reflect back to them what I see as it serves their goals. So it's one of the fun things. It's kind of different between sort of like teaching yoga or meditation or being sort of like a spiritual guru of types, guy like, I have spiritual teachers who are like, this is what you have to do if you want to get to a certain place. But when people come for coaching, they have their own desires, right? Like people are allowed to set their own goals and have their own desired
Yeah.
outcomes. And I think that it's the coach's job to serve and support that and offer reflection and, inquiry about, what's supporting that, what's getting in the way, and really respecting the autonomy and the wisdom and the creativeness of the people in front of you. Because this isn't coaching, is not
Mm,
therapy, right? If you could think of coaching, integration coaching or life coaching, even leadership coaching, is more akin to basketball coaching, right? You've got somebody in front of you who's good and has the capacity to be great. And you want to like
mhm.
bring forth that greatness, right? And of course, we all have wounds and we all have parts of us that are broken and need healing and things like that. But I think that, we do our clients a service when we see them as expressions of the divine, of great oneness, of cosmic consciousness as creative and beautiful people, and serve that.
Mm,
So my story about the alcohol, is maybe about alcohol and maybe not. And it's maybe about me and maybe it's not. But I think it's about listening to the wisdom that comes through when we're in other kinds of states, and to be
mm,
open to different perspectives that can be available to us through meditation, through LSD use, through ecstatic states of dance, right? Sober or not, and saying, okay, this is something that I kind of knew to be true deep down. And now I'm getting a really loud message and I'm ready. I'm ready, willing, and able to make the change. And that's what this is about.
and is it just as simple as listening and paying attention to those voices or those messages, or is there more than that for
Well,
you?
sometimes. I mean, depending, the thing is like giving stuff up is often easier than starting new things.
Hmm,
And starting new things often takes a new skill set and a new habit pattern, right? And also sometimes giving up alcohol requires a new skill set or a habit pattern because maybe you're drinking to avoid something and then you need to learn how to face your life and deal with things without checking out in that way.
mhm.
But it's much easier to perhaps for to stop doing a thing than it is to be like, oh, I'm going to help raise consciousness on the planet, and that requires a whole new way of being in the world. That requires training, it requires practice, and requires discipline and things of that nature. So sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not.
Mm.
Sometimes when you're done, you're just done.
I found that I hack my brain by putting my responsibility towards other people. Like, I've learned that my own commitments to myself are much weaker than commitments to other people. And so, lately I've been going through this process of just trying to increase my fortitude and capacity
Cool.
spiritually, mentally, emotionally, as a good partner, as a business person and an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And I think many folks who hear me talk know that I'm very flawed. Like, I make no I make no illusion, around it. And it's quite fascinating for me that if left to my own devices, I'm not really that disciplined of a person. But then when I'm beholden to other folks, my community or my clients or my staff and whatever, there then comes that desire to be better, you know? And I think it's quite, fascinating. You're sharing a couple things. I mean, I totally agree. We as humans love to put things in boxes. We love to assign labels to things. We love to say, this can only be used in a therapeutic context with a licensed mental health professional, or recreational is bad now because we now have intentional and therapeutic and whatnot. And what you're sharing about being a kid exploring substances, listening to music, maybe going out and dancing, that's like the main way that mainstream America is engaging with psychedelics nowadays, and I know that that is an awesome pathway. One of the best things that I heard you say, and I've quoted this at least twice in some other things, was you had this Instagram reel that said something along the lines of, "You would be surprised how many clinicians and professionals who are pioneering therapeutic psychedelic work, you'd be surprised how many of those folks found their inspiration on a sweaty dance floor."
Yeah, most of, especially like, the first wave of researchers, they won't tell you. I guarantee you that there are researchers who have given presentations, right, in front of large, austere audiences at universities and such, and they are quoting, the patient reported. Bro, that's them. It's what they have to say and what they discovered, and they're just saying, oh, our respondents reported having a feeling of connection and bliss.
The blurred line between anecdotal and empirical
Well, that's
evidence,
what,
you
we're
know?
all one, right? So,
Yeah, but our society, like, quote unquote, needs that.
yeah.
And with our American society, it's like, oh well, we need the data and when we need the evidence. And I do think that there is somewhat of a blurred line between needing some assurance in a society where trust is generally low, and
Mhm.
so you do need something to fall back on. And then on the other side of it, there is this whole part that maybe can never be empirically identified, you know? And which makes me think a little bit about, your conversation about leaving space for the mystery and the unknown. And I wonder if you could shed some light on that, because I've shared this a little bit with folks, and I talk a little bit more tangibly, but I also think that there somewhat is this like metaphysical definition of the mystery and the unknown. And I was just doing a preparation workshop where I was sharing with folks, well, you want to have a plan for sure, but then you also want to leave enough for spontaneity and leave enough for the unknown to happen. So I
Mhm.
wonder what your take is on all of that and why it's important in life and in psychedelic work.
Why it's important to leave room for spontaneity?
Yeah, like what does the mystery and the unknown mean to you in the nature of this work?
Well, so we don't know what's going on, just like objectively. Like, I don't know most of what is happening. Like, there's a sound out the window that could be a lawnmower or it could be something else. I don't know. Like, the world is full of, like, I don't know. Like, my wife took the kids maybe to the lake or maybe to the park, right? Like, they were discussing it as they went out the door. Hey, where do you want to go? I don't even know where my kids are, right? I'm pretty sure they're in town. Like, they're not far, but so all of this stuff, and I don't know what kind of mood they're going to be in when they get back. Are they going to be tired? Are they going to be hungry? Are they going to be fed? Are they going to be, was it happy? Was it a happy time? Did the kids argue? Like, what's coming back through the door? I don't know. So we're living in a world where the Buddhist philosophy, the Buddhist precept of interdependent co-origination.
Tell me.
Well, so like everything that happens has an infinite number of causes, right? So it's like for you to be born, your parents had to meet, their parents had to meet, right? So which means for them to meet, like 17 other different things had to happen. And for those things to happen, 20 other things had to happen. And so that's where we're living. We're kind of living in a moment that was created by infinite causes and effects all the way back to beginningless time, which you've
Mm,
witnessed on psychedelics. And if you haven't,
mhm,
you know,
mhm,
better luck next time.
mhm.
Um, so we're living in a world where like all of that is happening and we can't comprehend it. And we don't know what's coming. I don't know what phone call I'm going to get later today. I don't know what email I'm going to get later today. Right. And so the world is complex. It's chaotic. It's definite. It's obviously mysterious and confusing, right? We cannot know. We cannot know most things. And if we pretend and then if that makes us uncomfortable, right? If that feels like a threat, then we get tense and we get controlling and our ego gets ossified and we react to things poorly because they didn't fit in with what we thought they were going to be, what we wanted. And that's no way to live. So Nietzsche, right? I don't do a lot of Nietzsche quotes, but I believe he said, one must still have chaos to give birth to a shining star, right?
Mm,
So if we want our lives to be bright, we have to be okay with the fact that our lives are chaotic. We don't know what's coming at us. And we've got to surf, right? It's like, this is why, a lot of the times in our there's so many like modern movies where like the surfer is painted as a mystic, right? The
mm,
surfer is wise and he gazes out on the ocean and he's looking at the waves and he's learning about the flow of the ocean, right? And the ocean is a great sense of something that is big and vast and unknowable. And it can, really be dangerous, but we want to learn to sail or surf. There's even that. I watch a lot of kids' movies because I have kids, but like Moana learning to sail, right? The
mm,
fear of the ocean in Moana is a powerful easy to digest metaphor. And so if we're going into our psychedelic journeys thinking that we're constructing a square box or something, or that we're going to keep it in a square box, it's probably not going to go as well for us as if we approach it as a wave to be surfed that requires our balance and attentiveness and presence and ability to go with the flow, literally go with the flow.
Yeah, like if you set out there trying to control the wave, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of power, really.
Uh-huh.
Like, a lot, it's like the world, like, are we in a power struggle with the world,
Mm,
right? The ocean is not like, it's not personal if the wave knocks you over. The wave has more power than you, and you can get with the program or not, right? You might have
mm.
power over something in your life, but probably not as much as you think. And if you are exercising that, are you even exercising that in like a healthy, compassionate way? Like, do we meet the things we have power over with cruelty or compassion?
I imagine that notion that the world is chaotic and we have less power and influence over things can be quite terrifying with folks. I'm doing that thing that scientific studiers were doing. I'm saying, well, the patient reported so and so. I'm speaking from my own experience at times.
Scares me.
That was massively, massively terrifying and obviously affected my own world view. And you're giving so many great nuggets as far as analogy towards psychedelic experience. And I wonder if you have any thoughts for folks if they're listening to what you're saying and being like, well, that's scary. How do you move from that being something that might be overwhelming or terrifying or anxiety inducing, this notion that we're talking about, and how to embrace this the unknown and potentially turn it into something that I'm kind of reading in between the subtext that this has become something that's quite useful and meaningful to your life. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that transition.
Well, you could sit still and deal with your own mind. Everybody wants to meditate for 5 hours on mushrooms. Nobody wants to meditate for 20 minutes sober, right? Make a 20-minute playlist of wordless music and sit still.
Hmm.
And better yet, well, as Terence McKenna said, 5 dried grams in silent darkness. Sit for 20 minutes in silent darkness with no playlist. And what you'll find is that people say, I can't meditate. My mind's too loud. My mind moves too fast. Yeah, exactly. Right? Your mind's processing all of the chaos it's had to deal with its entire life.
Mm.
And you don't give it a break. You need a vacation from your job, right? Your mind needs a vacation from everything that you've been pushing into it through your sense organs, through your eyes and ears. That's sense organs, eyes, ears, whatever. And so you sit there and you might not realize that you're upset about something. You've been like putting on a brave face. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who realized in their journeys how exhausted they are, how
Hmm.
hard they've been trying, how hard they've been working to keep up, to meet expectations that they feel like have been put on them that they've internalized. And so everybody's tired. Everybody's worn out. The world's, on some ways, we've never had it so good. And on some ways, it's very demanding and very hard for us. It's chaos. It's not just chaos outside, it's chaos inside. And it's not that that's not even a bad thing. It's just a fact, right? If it's a fact, like alcohol is worse for you than mushrooms, and so it's like, can you just hang out with the fact that you're afraid for 20 minutes without trying to nerf the world, without trying to pad everything and control everything and just be like, wow, I'm freaked out. This isn't going the way I want it to. I'm afraid it's not going to go the way I want it to. And I'm just freaked out. And usually I watch TV or I drink or I do porn or some other not weird, I do some other thing that people do. And I'm just going to like hang out and be
Mm.
petrified for 20 minutes. And then maybe I'll introduce some compassion to myself and tell myself, it's okay. I'm going to visualize a white flower of peace for you. And I'm going to offer it to you with kindness.
Yeah. And there in our society we revere the unknown in a lot of
Sure.
different ways. Like when we are about to watch a basketball game, like you were sharing about that analogy of being a good coach is more akin to being a good basketball coach. We don't want to know the end outcome and the result. It's exciting because we actually don't know. We will watch a movie. We don't want to know the ending of it.
Mhm.
It kind of ruins the allure of the movie. And so I think this whole concept about embracing the unknown, sitting in stillness with yourself, I think is so, so hard for folks to do because it's so easy to check out with more stimuli and more stimuli and more stimuli. I was just sharing with a group I was teaching last week that there's a part of me that's terrified of sensory deprivation tanks
Mm.
because I know that there might be something in here that I might be terrified of.
Right.
And so all of these things are wonderful tools to navigate the psychedelic experience.
Right. That's interesting because I don't like sensory deprivation tanks for almost the opposite reason. I find that they're not sensory deprived enough.
Ah,
Like I go in there and I get salt water in my eyes and it burns. Even if they give me the goggles, it always gets in there. Usually they're too small for me. I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds. And invariably I start bumping against the edges, things like that. Invariably they will interrupt me before I'm done. Your hour's up. Right. So it's not, I wish it was more sensory. I'm better off just like in the dark on my bed.
or if you were going the psychedelic or substance route, there's always a good dissociative anesthetic like ketamine to deprive some senses as well.
Sure. Sure. That works as well. But I hear you. Yeah, it is scary. And that's the whole thing about, the cave archetype, like the cave metaphor. Like Luke Skywalker has to go in the cave, and he finds, that he is Darth Vader and Darth Vader, like the cave that I forget what the quote is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we've been unkind to ourselves. We've been unkind to the people we love. And so, sometimes bad things have happened to us, usually, but also we've been the bad thing. As Walter White says, we're the one who knocks, right? And so owning that can be tricky for people as well.
Yeah. I share in post journey in the afterglow kind of phase, and this will help us to transition our conversation because I want to talk a little bit more about coaching and facilitation work. And I share these two golden rules with folks, and it sounds to me when I hear it, it's a little hokey, but at the same time, I feel like we as a society are so, so bad at doing these two basic things. One is taking care of our needs. And I share with folks that that could be a sip of water, that could be a hug, that could be some quiet time, that could be some food. Like we are so, so terrible at actually taking care of our needs. And then the other one is being really kind and gentle to yourself, and so I kind of hear that with what you were just sharing a moment ago.
Well, people don't even know they have needs. They don't know what needs are. It hasn't been modeled for them that they're worthy of having their needs met. So it can be really tricky
Mm,
to even kind of introduce. And it's really nice. One of the things that we look at in my coaching training, segue, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, is
mhm,
that we look at Marshall Rosenberg, who created nonviolent communication. One of his big contributions is
mm,
he started creating lists of needs. Or he created he's like, needs are important. And then him and his team put together, these are what our natural needs are. These are our natural values. Everybody needs connection, acceptance, autonomy, safety, and these things. And sometimes you'll ask people what they need and they'll be like, and then you give them the list and they're like, oh,
right, right. I need
yeah. And
those.
then they also have a list of feelings. And this is the
Sure.
thing that really can be really handy for integration, right? And just handy in general. And this really blew my mind is that what I was taught, I needed somebody to tell me this. When our needs are met, we experience pleasant emotions. When our needs are not met, we experience unpleasant emotions. So you can work backwards. If you're having an unpleasant emotion, right? Fear, anger, guilt, shame, isolation, then there's a need not being met. What is the need?
Hmm.
How are you going to get it met?
And then the way in which you get it met, I think, is really powerful.
It's really powerful because sometimes people come out of a journey and they say, I need to quit my job, leave my house and go join the circus. And then what they've done is they've realized that they've strategized, and they've done it too fast. They move too fast because they don't know about needs. They just have strategized about, if I join the circus, that's going to meet my needs. And then in
Mhm.
a lot of integration is walking them back. Okay, what need will that meet if you join the circus? Oh, novelty, creative expression, adventure. Okay, great. Is there a way to maybe meet some of those needs without nuking your life? And
Mm.
they're like, oh,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe I could just learn juggling. Maybe I could maybe I could just do a weekend festival or something.
Mhm.
I've
Mhm.
had very
Mhm.
stoic people go through psychedelic journeys and then book a summer of concerts, which they never did. And they went and saw, it's like, it's good that all of these nostalgia acts are going. They went and they saw The Cure, they saw the Violent Femmes, they saw all of these like kind of 40th, 50th anniversary bands. And that's kind of what
Mhm.
met their needs in a way that fit into their life so that they could fortify themselves and grow in a way that would make them able to change their life in a way that was sustainable over time, as opposed to just, you know, chopping it up too fast. Because most people don't need a chop, they need steps.
Yeah. And what I hear in there is that not only does everybody have needs, everyone has feelings, but we also have narratives and stories. And I share with folks that it's just a part of human nature to want to be able to know things, to have a sense of familiarity, to have a sense of safety, and then to also say, if I do this, then this happens. That's also a mechanism of trying to tame the unknown. If I do this, then this is going to be the outcome. And that is, to me, what I've been sharing with folks in psychedelic work is the gift and the curse of conditionality. And so I really do appreciate, what you're sharing there about
Cool.
helping folks, walk back. And then also I imagine this is a little bit why, my own opinion here, that folks may feel so great during the psychedelic experience and then afterwards and then for a little bit. And then there are some folks who report, man, I lost it, they say.
Mhm.
I wish I could grasp. It was so accessible and there for me, that thing where all of my needs were met, or I felt that love, or I felt that whatever. And then now it's gone.
Yeah.
And kind of adding this framework that you're putting on, which is like, well, in that moment, your needs were quote unquote met. And then here there's this illusion that that's not accessible and available to you. And I think that there's this really beautiful philosophy and mindfulness, which is like, in the present moment, all needs are met. Like, what is there to solve in the present moment, you know?
Right. Well, I mean, in if we're gonna go this kind of mystic route, the true you is the one who meets the needs. Like, you are the meter of needs, right? You are effulgent and full and timeless and stainless, right? And infinitely generous and wise, right? That's our true nature. That's what's under under these like costumes. Hey, it's Jimmy and Dan doing Jimmy and Dan things, right? We're pretending we're these people having a conversation, right? And that's fun. It's just a bunch of psychobabble going back and forth. But like the soul is essentially love itself and wisdom itself, right? And truth itself. And so we hop up above our egos and then we get to be our real self. And that's cool. And then, we lose sight of that and that's okay. And then also sometimes we make plans, right? So then we strategize. And then the world isn't, the world's doesn't cater to us,
Mhm.
right? Is what people kind of find. It's like, oh yeah, it's like retreat center in Costa Rica. And it's like the world is like, your credit sucks.
One of the best examples that I have that the world will move regardless of your best laid plans is going on a hike in nature. If you've been in nature, like a really expansive landscape like the Rocky Mountains or something like that. I had this one moment where I was just sitting there. We're on this backpacking trip. We're trying to hit this certain mile by a certain time so that we can get up and do this waterfall hike, something, something. And it just struck me. I was like, nature doesn't care at all whether I'm going to make this quote unquote on time or not. And nature is going to continue, and we can revere nature as this thing that provides and this thing that has this beautiful divine timing, and we can tap into that, or we can tap into the quote unquote callousness and lack of care that nature has. And I bring that up because to me it's almost a summation of what we've been talking about for the last little bit.
Well, the callousness is from the perspective of the ego structure, of me as this single, like, autonomous entity that is separate from all things. Like, I'm separate, I'm long lasting, I'm important. And when we're not being catered to, that looks like callousness and violence, where it's just not about that body. Like, it's not about that body. Like, the world doesn't center around our bodies and personalities.
Right. Which the way that we talk about psychedelics in our modern society, you would think that it does. I think that there's a lot of great work out there around, Peter Levine's work, Bessel van der Kolk's work, trauma-informed work. And, I really believe in the power of getting out of your own way. I believe in the power of like stepping outside of yourself a little bit. And for what it's worth, I also believe that play and levity is also massively, massively important. And I'm curious to learn a little bit more about how you serve. So I know that you hold a year-long coaching container for integration coaches. And it seems like one of your passions is how to support people going from, good to great as it relates to psychedelic coaching. And I'm wondering what inspired that and how it came to look how it does today.
Well, so when I had my sort of like, everybody's got those psychedelic enlightenment things where they're like, oh, wow, I got to like help heal the world kind of thing. Like, none of this was a job then. I mean, there were like 3 therapists and, there were 3 therapists in Berkeley doing stuff. And, there's Peru was happening, I guess. And there's a couple of people maybe like doing Peru stuff, but in large part, it wasn't a thing. And since I sort of had a yoga meditation background, I was sort of working with Be Here Now, Ram Dass's Be Here Now, which is basically the first integration manual ever written. This kind of like yoga fried integration manual that I had really taken to heart and worked with a bunch. Just becoming a yoga and meditation teacher seemed to be the thing. So I became a yoga and meditation teacher, certified to teach in like 2002 or something, right? And so I was doing that. And because the goal was like to raise consciousness. It was, the consciousness, and to hear Ram Dass say it, it's like consciousness is raised in a lasting way through practice, not through psychedelics. Psychedelics is, true, from his point of view, was an initiatory experience that was then supposed to be practiced and lived for the rest of your life.
You build upon the psychedelic experience in everyday life.
Yeah, it was, he called it the helicopter ride to the top of the mountain, the tour, and then you go and climb. So, okay, let's climb. And so it was molecule agnostic. And, so, I became a yoga teacher. I had my own studio for a while, and, people start coming to the studio and they start saying, hey, train us to be yoga teachers. It's like, okay. So then, you fill out the paperwork for Yoga Alliance and you start training yoga teachers. And so I did that for a while and sort of transitioned into coaching. I found kind of more interesting because I find that some of my favorite coaching sessions feel like a shared state of meditation where we're like really walking freely through the client's mind, almost through a shared mind, right? Because there's really only one mind anyway, right? Ego and absolute, right? So you're getting closer to that space of shared mind. And so I was doing that, and a lot of my clients were psychedelic savvy anyway, go figure. They felt like they could talk to me about psychedelics anyway, go figure. And they came from the community, this community, which was burgeoning and blossoming and growing pre-Michael Pollan. And so I was coaching, and then I was integration coaching. And then I kind of decided I moved to the West Coast, and I sort of had this other job, and, I sort of the coaching came forward again, and I wanted an integration circle. They were doing one in Berkeley, but it was kind of a far drive, and I wanted one in our neighborhood. And then, of course, people who had their own ayahuasca circles would have their own integration circles, but, if you went on a retreat or something, but there wasn't one for like the rest of us who were doing things kind of on our own, or, in friend groups or things like that.
Sure.
So I started with integration circles. And Mike Margulies, who you might know.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I'm going to start an integration circle. He was like, well, you need a name for it. And I was like, no, I just want to have one. I don't want a brand or a company. He was like, you need a brand. You need like a psychedelic society or something. Like, no one's just going to come to Dan's integration circle. And I was like, fine. And I came up with TAM Integration. I thought that was pretty cool. The domain name was free. And so we started having integration circles in the local community acupuncture space, once a month. A little bit later, we added them in at Polaris. Those they do a lot of like the ketamine training, like really high quality, like actual therapy and like work with people, not just hooking people up to a machine and then kicking them out the door, like real deep work. They're great people over there. And we were using their space for a time. And then I was also doing like the smaller class called Meditation for the Journey, which was about meditation tools. I still run it once or twice a year, meditation tools for psychonauts. And more guides started showing up wanting to learn those tools, which was cool. And then more and more people were like, hey, we want to coach like you do. My practice was growing and stuff like that. And so, I built a yoga, a coaching training, which I still sometimes call teacher training because I've got many years of like running yoga teacher trainings.
Sure. Yeah.
And to be honest, I was looking at the Oregon guidelines, for the Oregon thing. And I was like, I was thinking, oh, we should do an Oregon program. And I was looking at the hours and I was like, this isn't sufficient. Like, this is not going to produce a competent coach who can work with people. Like, it's not enough time, and there's too much focus on other stuff. There's focus on stuff that people could learn on their own. Like you don't need contact hours necessarily. This is my opinion. So based on, let's say, I think there was 120 hours. Our thing is 175 contact hours, like where we're together, like mostly on Zoom. We meet a couple of times. But if you only have 175 hours to spend like 6 hours live together on history, you're doing your students a disservice. You can read books, you can watch videos. Like those, you don't need me to tell you. Like, you don't need to sit in a room with a person live telling you that Maria Sabina is important. She is, but somebody already said that, right? Go learn. That's book learning, right? This comes from my yoga teacher background. We have drills we have to do. We're working with clients. Like, yoga, you can have all the yoga philosophy you want. It's cool to discuss that, but we can discuss that in the chat, right? It depends. We do discuss philosophy, but, we can just read the history thing. You can discuss it in chat. We need to focus on yoga. Like, can you get somebody in and out of triangle pose safely? Can you have a conversation about boundaries with your client? Can you onboard your client about what it might be like when they show up to a thing, right? Can you help your client with the material that comes up when they've sat quietly for 20 minutes and there's fear? Like, can you talk to them about that? And so, I wanted to design a program that was skills training for people. It's like, I want people to be able to take people through the practices where they track their needs and their emotions so that they can strategize right-sized activities that are going to meet those needs and are going to help them live up to the vision that they had in a psychedelic space. It's like, if you want to learn, like, we've got a collection of videos on pharmacology, right? Watch them if you want to watch them. Learn about pharmacology. We're doing skills training, like in our 175 hours, right? And so again, I saw the Oregon program. Oregon programs are cool. I've got friends who run Oregon programs, and they're great, and they do what they do, and hopefully people are getting continuing education. But for, the people the way I want to send people out in the world, we had to have a different focus. right? That wasn't designed by committee, right? A political committee that was making decisions based on a whole bunch of things.
Appeasing the needs of many constituents. Yeah.
Right, who probably don't work in the field,
Mhm.
right? It's like, are you like there's a bunch of people that don't know what it's like to work with people all day, every day,
Yeah.
and what it takes to do that.
And what I hear you sharing is this importance of acknowledging that theoretical knowledge only takes you so far, and then you have to have practice and actually have applicable skills, which I think is so overlooked. And I'm curious, when you're thinking about, your year-long integration coaching container, what are the main things? Like somebody starts the program, which I believe you're getting some signups soon, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But somebody starts the program a year later. How do you know that you've done a successful job? Like, what are the things that you look for in that coach where you say, okay, you are one step closer from being good to great as an integration coach?
Right. Well, I look for a certain amount of patience with the people that are in front of them. So we do have check-in calls, like part of their homework. And again, sort of on the practical level, the homework is not like write a paper about psilocybin and major depressive disorder, right? I'm not training writers, right? So their exercises are things like coach one of your friends for 20 minutes and let's go over it. It's like, run this exercise and write your reflections on it, right? So it's like you do the practices, write reflections, record yourself doing the thing, let's go over it, right? And so I witnessed them coach, well, throughout the program, because we do, like, the classes are a lot like, okay, here's some information, here's a tool, here's how you might introduce a thing and have a conversation about this. Now, let's do it, and I'll demo it.
Do the thing.
Let's do the
Like,
thing. So
actually do the thing.
we spend a
Yeah.
lot of time doing the thing and giving each other feedback on the thing. But then they have, at least 3 assignments where, they record coaching calls or they perform coaching calls live and then they get feedback. Usually people are able to do that to some extent, right? And one of the things that we find that's really interesting is that a lot of the times people are having coaching conversations about things that are unrelated to psychedelics, because it's all connected. They'll talk, hey, do you want to talk about your recent experience? And it's even interesting. This will be fun because someone will show up and they will say, let's have a conversation about your recent experience. And then all of a sudden, this is how I know they're doing good coaching. The person starts talking about the experience. And then after about 7 minutes, we're actually talking about needs and emotions and strategies for growth. That we're not just like, oh, wow, what do you think the purple alien meant? Right. It's like, it's more about, it was revealed to me that, I've got healing to do in this area. It's like, okay, what would it look like if, that healing journey was happening and going successfully? It would look like this. Okay. What are some of the things that are supporting that? What are some of the things that are standing in the way of that? And so it largely becomes about the journey of the individual and less about like, oh, wow, you did that many grams.
I share with folks that you can have 1,000 psychedelic experiences and maybe it doesn't get you that quote unquote far, but you can sit on a mat and meditate for 1,000 hours. And I would imagine that that gets you, somewhere. And what I hear you sharing, in addition to the patience and the ability to earnestly work with people, I really like that last part that you said, which I identify as distillation. Like, how do we take the thing and distill it to whatever the core essence of the content? That's a hard thing to teach. What you're describing, like, how do you teach somebody patience? How do you teach somebody, like, these are hard things to teach.
Yeah. Well, I forget who coined the phrase like deep practice, but we know that if you want to be a good guitar player, you have to practice scales. If you want to be a great basketball player, you've got to spend some time just doing free throws. You might get your 10,000 hours of free throws.
Mm.
And so we start slow because some people are just like, they don't even know how to start a coaching conversation. What happens in the first 5 minutes of a coaching conversation, right? And it's largely the same. And then it goes from there. But if you drill, like I ask people to drill the first 5 minutes of a coaching conversation,
Mm.
right? So you would think that somebody who's brand new, maybe they have offered advice to their friends when they were in need, right? But now they get a stranger. Somebody refers somebody to them, or they meet somebody at a party and then they're coaching them or whatever. They find them on the internet. And then that can be nerve-wracking for a beginner. Oh, how's it going to go? What's it going to go? If you're confident about the first 5 minutes of a coaching session because you've done it with your cohort 25 times, at least you've got that.
Yeah. And that first 5 minutes is so important. And I can imagine that if you were so wrapped up in the performative aspect of making sure that that engagement is really good, because what I hear you saying is practice it enough so that it becomes second nature, so that you can do the thing that's important in coaching, which is actually listening to your client.
Mhm.
And if you listen and allow somebody to talk, within the first 5 minutes, you're really going to learn what they care about, how they
Mhm.
see the world, their stories, what pains them.
Yeah.
But you got to listen. And that's so important. And I wonder, like, when you're trying to discern if an interested person is a fit for your coaching container, who are the ideal people to join this? Because I get questions all the time.
Mhm.
How do I become a facilitator? What training course should I do? What certification course should I do? What advice do you have to give me to become a facilitator or an integration coach? And I'm very wary on recommending things because I largely don't know enough about people's journeys to tell them, tangible, actual advice for them. But I deeply respect what you do, Daniel,
Thank you.
and I very much see that you are here to increase the capacity of folks doing this work, folks who are, as you say, continually like in the trenches. And so I wonder, like, who are you looking for these coaching containers?
Right. I was very excited to meet somebody who's joining our class and she does other work, right? Like it's cool if people are doing work on themselves outside of psychedelics. Like I don't necessarily want a person who has done no work on themselves and has had a handful of experiences and then they're going to do the thing. And they've got
Mhm.
no other kind of practice or support or history of community engagement. And it's not necessarily I won't necessarily take somebody, but like that's something, this person I was talking to, she was like, "Oh yeah, well I've been a part of this thing for like 11 years and I assist with that sometimes. And, I just finished this program and this is the work I'm doing with my therapist. And because I'm not, I'm the teacher, I'm not the therapist of people. The program can be difficult. It's good to have, some other support. Like it's not impossible, but, it's like stuff comes up for people. So, like folks who kind of understand that, it's a whole holistic thing. We were talking about creating sort of the lifestyle. And so, kind of good hearted people with vision and a proclivity for doing their own work is great. It's great if folks have done some self employed stuff already. It's like great if people are a freelancer. That's cool, even if they're a skydive instructor or they're a this kind of thing or that kind of thing. That's really handy because then they know what it's like to kind of like work on their own. And then what's interesting is we do get folks who are like, "Oh, I'm never really going to work in this space much."
Mm.
It's like I kind of need, I work in tech and I kind of want a hobby. The people who are kind of doing I really respect people who are doing it for their own edification.
Yeah, yeah, to learn the skill or to learn the craft. I mean, that's why That's why I went through EMT school. Like, I knew I wasn't gonna sit on an ambulance, you know,
Yeah.
but I wanted to learn the life-saving skills.
Yeah.
And so I really hear that. And this has been such a great conversation, Daniel. Thank you so much. Every time I chat with you, I feel like I learned something. And so I do hope that our audience has really enjoyed this conversation, and maybe they too will hear a takeaway of some things that might
Yeah.
be applicable and meaningful to their experience. And I realize we've been talking for over an hour, so we should probably
Good time.
wrap this thing up soon. I wonder, Daniel, is there anything else that you want to share with this audience or this group, or just anything on your heart
Yeah.
that you feel is important to say?
I'm very proud of all of you. I know that it's hard. We were talking about how it's hard out there. And if you're doing this and you're showing up for it, you're showing up for yourself, even if you're making mistake after mistake. I'm really glad you're trying. And on a practical note, Jimmy doesn't necessarily want to plug things, but if you reach out to me about the training program and you drop his name, you're going to save a couple $100.
Yeah, we'll tell folks a little bit more. So I'm sure that you have piqued some folks' interest.
Hmm.
I do know that you are actively engaging with folks to join your year-long cohort, which I believe has limited seats, and it seems like this is a process that's quite personal in nature with these smaller groups. So tell folks where they can find you, where they can find your content, how they might book an interest call maybe or something.
Yeah, go to tamintegration.com. And I'm on all the social medias. So you can type my name into Google, I'll come up. And you can find the information pretty easy. You can find ways to contact me pretty easy. So I'm Daniel Shankin at TAM Integration. Yeah, and we can have a conversation about that. Yeah, we keep the group small. We don't have like a large team. We've got great teachers. We've got great adjunct faculty, but there's not like some of these programs where there's this huge machine and infrastructure and you're going to get on a call with a Tony Robbins trained salesman. You're going to get a call with me and we're going to just chat and you're going to join or you're not. And it's fine either way. And that's how it goes. There's other smaller classes that happen and there's a community group. There's like the community of psychonauts called the Golden Road. People can come in for weekly meetings, and we have group meditations and things like that, guest speakers and things. Yeah, I think I try to be easy to find
Yeah.
virtually.
And I'm excited. I know that we're exploring ways for maybe me to participate in a guest lecture or two.
Yes.
We might do some stuff about, safety protocols and things of that nature. And, even in this friendship, Daniel, I feel like I've gained quite a bit of insight. And so I imagine that if people spend time with you, that they too can increase their capacity and ability to be a great coach. So you can take that as my formal plug for your services. I'll correct myself to say that I'm wary of promoting folks until I know who the people are behind things. And I find you to be a person who is really walking the walk to my knowledge. And so thank you for, your gifts and choosing to share with a wider audience. And I would highly suggest anybody who is looking to increase their capacity as a psychedelic practitioner or an integration coach to check out this year long cohort there.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for your time, Daniel. That wraps up our time here at the Psychedelic Passage podcast. Thank you all so much. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And before we wrap up, I'll do that thing that I normally do, which is just to read a quick little review from our audience. This one, this is actually pretty fascinating, a little bit off topic, but this is somebody who went through a ceremonial program with us. They said, I did this because I wanted to quit smoking. Well, I haven't had a cigarette since my journey. and can't be more pleased. I don't know how it works, but it did. I still get urges, some very strong, but still managing to fend them off. I feel like I should maybe do another journey to possibly cement the not smoking in my head, but need the courage to do it on my own. I will get there though. I was fortunate enough to get a sponsor, and I'm so grateful for that. Otherwise, I most likely would have never been able to do this. The way that the program's set up and the available material and advice and podcasts all listed on your website are so helpful. I am recommending your site to everyone that I feel will benefit from your program. Thank you. So thank you to that individual who was able to reach out. And it's just a reminder for me on why we do this work. This was a person who got a full ride journeyership from one of our program alumni to move into a meaningful psychedelic experience. And so just thank you to everybody for their trust in moving through and helping Psychedelic Passage to connect you to a good facilitator or coach. So I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Psychedelic Passage podcast.